There is a very specific tell in the way a rapper acts when he knows the paperwork is closing in on him, and Drake gave the whole internet that tell live on camera on Saturday night. In the middle of a kick stream through steak, in the middle of laughing with the chat, in the middle of what was supposed to be another harmless gambling night, Drake looked up, half-smirked at the screen, and said the words, GG's. The Roc Nation subpoenas are about to be cleared. He laughed after. He shrugged after. He kept scrolling after. But the room he was really talking to is not the chat, and the room he was really talking to is not steak, and the room he was really talking to is not even the fans he keeps insisting are still with him. The room Drake was talking to sits inside a building in downtown Manhattan with Roc Nation on the door, and inside that building, if the reporting is right, Jay-Z was already 3 moves ahead of him before the stream ever went live. That is where this story starts, and that is where nothing about this story is going to make sense unless you understand one thing first, which is that Drake, Jay-Z, and Kendrick Lamar are not in the same fight anymore. They have not been in the same fight for a long time. Drake is in a courtroom fight, Jay-Z is in a stadium fight, and Kendrick Lamar is in a fight that neither of the other two can even reach because he stopped playing on their board and started drawing his own. Now before we go any further, I want to say something honestly, because a lot of channels are going to run with this Drake livestream clip today, and they are going to spin it however gets the most rage in the comments, and I do not want to do that here. If this content has ever helped you understand a story before the headlines caught up, do me one small favor and tap subscribe. That is it. That is the only ask. Because what is about to be laid out over the next 14 minutes is not a beef recap, and it is not a Team Kendrick versus Team Drake segment. This is a mapping of what 3 of the most important people in this culture are doing at the exact same moment, and how one of them just fumbled the leverage he had left. So back to the stream. The line Drake dropped, GG's, the Roc Nation subpoenas are about to be cleared, is a legal reference, and it is a very specific one. For anyone who has not been following the paperwork, Drake's legal team has been trying for months to force Roc Nation to hand over communications tied to the whole rollout of the record that ended his 2024. Subpoenas were filed. Roc Nation pushed back. Motions to quash were argued. And the read from Drake, sitting in front of a live stream audience, was that those subpoenas were about to be, in his words, cleared, which in courtroom language would mean granted, enforced, unlocked. He was not sad about it. He was not nervous about it. He was laughing about it, the way somebody laughs when they think they've finally caught the person who has been dodging their calls. And that is where it gets uncomfortable, because the person Drake thinks he caught is Jay-Z. Not Roc Nation the company. Not the lawyers. Jay-Z the person. And Jay-Z the person, on the exact same weekend Drake was streaming from Steak, was announcing more stadium dates for the Jay-Z 30 tour. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, September 4th and 5th. SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, October 23rd and 24th. Yankee Stadium in New York, a second night added on top of the sold-out first one. Paris in September. Los Angeles again in October. A tour that is not a farewell, is not a comeback, is being framed by Jay-Z's own camp as a 30-year anniversary lap around the sport he already won. Do you see what happens when you put those 2 headlines next to each other? Because the algorithm sees it, and the culture sees it, and the older heads in the culture, the ones who have been watching men age through this business for 4 decades, they especially see it. On one side you have Drake, in a chair, in front of a webcam, muttering about subpoenas to a chat that is half bots. On the other side you have Jay-Z, in a suite somewhere, announcing that 4 different NFL-sized stadiums on 2 different continents are about to be his living room for 1 month straight. The distance between those 2 images is not a distance you can wrap your way back across. And this is the thing about Drake that I think a lot of people are afraid to say out loud, so I am going to say it here plainly and let the comments handle it. Drake is not losing because Kendrick Lamar beat him. Drake is losing because he refuses to stop being visible. He is on Kick every other week. He is on Instagram every other day. He is dropping features while the paperwork is still wet from the last one. He is monetizing his own downtime because the shape of his business demands it. Meanwhile, Jay-Z has said maybe 40 public words this entire calendar year, and each one of those 40 words moved a market. That is the difference between a rapper and an owner, and I say that with no smoke, with no shade. I say that as somebody who grew up on the same Drake music everybody else did. Because the man on that Steak stream on Saturday night, laughing about subpoenas, is not the same man who ran the culture from 2015 to 2019. The man from that era did not need to explain himself. He did not need to live stream. He did not need to remind you he was still there, because you could not have forgotten him if you tried. What we are watching now with Drake is what happens when a rapper's business model requires him to be seen more than it requires him to be right, and when your business requires visibility that badly. You eventually say the wrong sentence in front of the wrong camera on the wrong night, and Saturday night was that night. Now let us walk over to the Kendrick Lamar side of the room, because Kendrick is doing the exact opposite thing and doing it on purpose. Kendrick Lamar has, by any honest count, been almost invisible in 2026. He has not gone on a press run. He has not fired shots. He has not live-streamed. He has not, to my knowledge, sat down for a single long-form interview since the Super Bowl halftime moment closed his last chapter. And in the absence of him being loud, something interesting happened, which is that the culture started noticing what Kendrick was actually building, which is a company. Not a label. A company. pgLang, project rollouts with the NBA Players Association, creative direction credits under Dave Free, quiet moves that only surface when the finished product is already shipping. Kendrick is not chasing the news cycle, he is architecting the next one. And this is where you have to give Kendrick Lamar his flowers even if you were never a fan of the music, because what Kendrick is doing right now is a move that most rappers of his generation genuinely do not know how to make. Most rappers, when they win a beef the size of the one Kendrick won in 2024, they immediately cash the win. They tour it. They merch it. They release the diss on streaming and count the plays. Kendrick did not do that. Kendrick pulled the whole thing off streaming for a stretch, walked into the Super Bowl, made his statement in front of the biggest television audience of the year, and then vanished back into the studio and the boardroom. That is not accidental. That is a man who understands that the loudest move you can make in 2026 is the move nobody sees you making. And that brings us to Jay-Z, because Jay-Z, whether Drake wants to admit it out loud or not, is the reason both of the other men in this story are moving the way they are moving. Jay-Z is the model. He is the archetype that Drake once tried to imitate and now openly resents, and he is the archetype that Kendrick Lamar is quietly trying to improve on. When Jay-Z announced the Jay-Z 30 dates, he was not announcing a concert. He was reminding the entire genre that a rapper who owns his masters, owns his publishing, owns his tour rights, and owns his relationship with Live Nation can walk on a stage at 56 years old, sell out 4 stadiums in one weekend, and never have to explain a single lyric to a single podcast. That is what winning looks like at the executive tier of this culture. Nobody argues with you. Nobody drags you. Nobody subpoenas you, because you were 3 legal firewalls ahead of the subpoena before it was ever filed. And that is why Drake mentioning Roc Nation on a live stream, laughing about it, playing it like a punchline, is going to age so badly. Because Jay-Z did not build Roc Nation to be the villain in Drake's story. Jay-Z built Roc Nation so that Roc Nation is the story, and everybody else, including Drake, is just a paragraph inside it. When you attack an institution that is bigger than your discography, the institution does not need to respond. It just keeps operating. It announces stadium dates. It signs new artists. It closes new deals. It goes to Cannes. And you, meanwhile, are still on kick at midnight trying to convince the chat that you have leverage. Here is the pressure point, and this is the sentence I want you to sit with, because I think this is what the next 6 months of hip-hop are going to be built around. Drake is running out of villains. He has been in beef with Kendrick Lamar. He has been in beef with Rick Ross. He has been in beef with Metro Boomin. He has been in beef with Pusha T going back years, and now he is publicly circling Jay-Z on a stake stream. When you run out of villains at the top of the genre, you do not become bigger than the genre. You become the last man standing in a room everybody else already walked out of, and nobody is bigger than an empty room. And this is the thing you have to understand about Jay-Z that most Drake fans have not internalized yet. Jay-Z does not respond in bars anymore. He has not needed to respond in bars for 15 years. Jay-Z responds in press releases, in tour announcements, in NFL partnerships, in Roc Nation School of Music and Sports and Entertainment, in stakes in Uber, in Armand de Brignac deals, in title exits, in Bacardi settlements, in ownership positions inside businesses that outlive the news cycle by decades. If you take a shot at Jay-Z on a live stream, the reply is going to arrive 2 years later in a form you did not know you were reading until it was already on top of you. That is the man Drake is subtweeting. That is the game Drake is trying to play. Meanwhile, all the way on the other coast, Kendrick Lamar is playing a game that does not even have Jay-Z or Drake in it. Kendrick, from everything the reporting is showing, is moving into a lane where the goal is not to sit on the throne of hip-hop. The goal is to own the room the throne is inside of. Kendrick Lamar has been building out a creative company with Dave that touches short film, music video direction, fashion, brand partnership, and now athlete-facing ventures. That is a distribution empire in miniature. And the thing that makes it dangerous, if you are somebody like Drake, is that Kendrick's empire has no interest in beefing with you, because his empire is not measuring itself against yours. His empire is measuring itself against the empires Jay-Z and Diddy built in the 2000s, and it is measuring itself against those empires with the intent to correct their mistakes. Because let us be honest about one thing. Jay-Z is the greatest music executive rap has ever produced, but Jay-Z's empire has always been tied at the hip to a bigger empire. Roc Nation lives inside a broader Live Nation ecosystem. That is a partnership, and it is a lucrative one, and it has made Jay-Z one of the wealthiest artists to ever pick up a microphone, but it is still a partnership. Meaning there is still a table that Jay-Z sits at where he is not the person at the head of the table. Kendrick Lamar, based on how pgLang is structured, does not appear to be sitting at anybody else's table. That is the correction. That is the improvement on the Jay-Z model that people are starting to whisper about, but nobody wants to say out loud, because saying it out loud sounds like disrespect toward Jay-Z, and it is not disrespect, it is architecture. So here is the full picture on this Saturday, August 8th, 2026 night. Drake is on kick, laughing about subpoenas, telling rival rappers not to diss him, hinting that Roc Nation is about to lose a paperwork battle. Jay-Z is announcing that 4 stadiums on 2 continents are about to belong to him for 1 month straight. Kendrick Lamar has said nothing publicly, is not on any live stream, is not on any timeline, and is quietly, off the timeline, closing deals with athletes, brands, and creative partners that most fans will not hear about until 2027. 3 men. 3 completely different games. And Drake is the only one of the 3 still trying to convince a chat window that he is winning. Now, some people are going to hear this and say I am being unfair to Drake, and I want to answer that directly. Because I do not think this is unfair, I think this is accurate, and there is a difference. Drake has done more for hip-hop's crossover into mainstream pop than almost any rapper in the last 15 years. That is a real accomplishment. Drake has more Billboard weeks than everybody in his class combined. That is a real accomplishment. Drake still moves streams that most rappers can only dream about. That is a real accomplishment. But accomplishments do not shield you from the truth of what your business currently looks like, and the truth of what Drake's business currently looks like is that it is built on a model of constant, aggressive, unrelenting visibility. And that model has diminishing returns the older you get and the more paperwork you accumulate. Kendrick Lamar figured out something about visibility that Drake, so far, has not. Kendrick figured out that in an attention economy, the scarcest resource is not attention itself, it is absence. When Kendrick Lamar disappears for 6 months, every move he makes when he reappears is worth 10 of the moves Drake made during those same 6 months, because the audience has been starved. Drake is feeding the audience so constantly that the audience has stopped tasting the food. That is not a diss. That is a diagnostic. That is what the algorithm is telling us in the retention curves, in the comment sentiment, in the shift in who is trending on rap Twitter on any given Sunday. The market is telling Drake something, and Drake, on that stake stream on Saturday, showed us he is not ready to hear it yet. And here is where Jay-Z steps back into the frame, because this is the part of the story that I think is going to matter the most in 5 years, when we look back at the summer of 2026 and try to figure out where the pivot happened. Jay-Z is playing 4 stadiums in 1 month at the age of 56. That is not just an achievement. That is a demonstration. That is Jay-Z showing every rapper under 40 what the long game actually looks like. You do not livestream your way to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. You do not tweet your way to SoFi. You do not subtweet your way to Yankee Stadium. You build, you own, you shut up, you build again, you own again, you shut up again. And eventually you look up and you are the only rapper in your generation who can casually announce a run of stadiums on 2 continents and have every single one of them sell out in a weekend. That is the sentence Kendrick Lamar is reading right now. That is the sentence Kendrick is walking, sentence by sentence, word by word, into his own version of. And that is the sentence Drake, based on Saturday night, appears to have stopped reading somewhere around the middle chapter. And that is not a beef take. That is a business take. That is a career arc take. That is the take that when you look back on August 8th, 2026 in 5 years, is going to feel obvious, and it is going to feel obvious because the tape is already in front of us. We just have to be honest about what we are watching. Now I know somebody is in the comments right now typing that this is just another Drake hate video, and I want to head that off before it starts, because it is not. This is a Drake diagnostic video. I have said on this channel many times that Drake, at his peak, was one of the most gifted melody writers hip-hop has ever produced. That has not changed. What has changed is the environment around Drake. And the environment around Drake in 2026 is an environment where Jay-Z is quietly running a 30-year anniversary tour that reminds everybody who the actual senior executive of the genre is. And it is an environment where Kendrick Lamar has walked into a lane where he does not need to be in the conversation with Drake at all in order to be the most important artist of the moment. Drake is fighting to stay in a conversation that Kendrick already left and Jay-Z was never in. And that is the part that has to land, because I do not think Drake fans have fully sat with it. Drake is not losing to Kendrick Lamar. Drake is losing to a version of hip-hop that Kendrick Lamar is quietly building, and to a version of hip-hop that Jay-Z built 20 years ago and is currently doing a victory lap through. Drake is losing to the model. He is losing to the architecture. He is losing to the idea that rappers do not have to be personalities anymore. They can be institutions, and institutions do not need to live stream from Steak at Midnight. Institutions have quarterly reports. Institutions have partnership announcements. Institutions have stadium runs. Drake has a kick stream, and on Saturday, Drake used that kick stream to remind us that the paperwork is closing in. The other thing I want to point out, because I think it will get glossed over in the takes tomorrow morning, is the specific language Drake used. He said GGs, which is gamer language, which is chat language, which is the language of the 22-year-old streamers he has surrounded himself with over the last 2 years. And when a 39-year-old, decade and a half into his career rap superstar chooses gamer chat language to reference federal-tier subpoenas against a $2 billion company, what he is telling you, whether he realizes it or not, is that the room he is speaking to is shrunk. He is not speaking to fans anymore. He is speaking to chat. Those are different audiences. Chat does not fill Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Chat does not buy Yankee Stadium tickets. Chat clips your worst moment and posts it to X within 4 minutes, which is exactly what happened. Contrast that with the last statement Jay-Z put out about the Jay-Z 30 tour, which was quiet, dignified, professionally worded, and came through official channels only. Contrast that with the last time Kendrick Lamar addressed the culture, which was a Super Bowl halftime show that spoke in imagery and choreography and did not use a single line of chat language. 3 men. 3 registers. 3 completely different theories of how a rap career should sound in its second decade. And the market, whether the market wants to admit it or not, is picking a side, and the side it is picking is not the kick side. And here is the part where I have to be personal for a second, because if I do not say this, this whole video is going to feel like I am dunking on Drake for sport, and that is not what this is. I have been making hip-hop analysis videos on this channel for a long time, and there was a season where Drake's music got me through a stretch of my own life that I do not talk about much. I owe that man some real gratitude for the writing he did between 2011 and 2016. So it is not that I want Drake to lose. It is that I want Drake to see what everybody else is seeing, which is that the kick stream is not the room. The room is being built by other people, and the door to that room does not open by clout. It opens by ownership. Jay-Z is standing inside that room. Kendrick Lamar is currently laying the tile in the next one over. Drake is on a webcam. Now let us finish the loop on the actual legal question, because I do not want to leave you with all interpretation and no facts. What Drake was likely referring to on the stream is the ongoing motion practice around his defamation and related claims against parties tied to the Kendrick Lamar record from 2024. Roc Nation, as the corporate entity that manages Kendrick Lamar's live business and various brand deals, has been the target of subpoenas seeking internal communications about the marketing rollout of that record. Roc Nation has fought those subpoenas. Motions have been filed on both sides. The line about to be cleared appears to be Drake signaling to his audience that a ruling he expects to go his way is coming. Whether that ruling actually arrives, and whether it arrives on the timeline Drake seems to think it will, is a completely separate question, and one that not even Drake's own legal team has publicly promised. Because here is the practical reality of subpoenaing an entity like Roc Nation. Even if Drake wins the motion, even if the paperwork gets handed over, what he is going to get is business communications about a rollout that, from Roc Nation's point of view, was a normal artist rollout. Roc Nation manages many artists. Roc Nation runs many campaigns. The idea that inside those communications is a smoking gun that reframes the entire Kendrick Lamar victory is, respectfully, a very Drake assumption to make. Jay-Z did not become Jay-Z by leaving smoking guns in email threads. Roc Nation did not become Roc Nation by leaving smoking guns in email threads. And even if there were something in there, it would be inside a legal process that takes years to play out, and by the time it plays out, Jay-Z will have finished the Jay-Z 30 tour, Kendrick Lamar will have released his next album, and Drake will still be on kick, hopefully with a better answer than GG's. Which is why the Saturday stream feels less like a legal update and more like a mood report. Drake was letting his audience feel his confidence. He was letting them feel his edge. He was reminding them he still had cards to play. But confidence is not a court order, and edge is not a settlement, and a kick stream in front of a chat is not a press conference. Jay-Z will not respond to it. Kendrick Lamar will not respond to it. Roc Nation, as an institution, will keep operating the way institutions operate, which is slowly, quietly, and with an army of attorneys who bill by the 6-minute increment. And if we are being technical for a second about the actual filing history, the Roc Nation subpoenas that Drake referenced on the kick stream trace back to filings his legal team put on the docket in 2025, after the initial motion practice narrowed his claims. Roc Nation, which is not a named defendant, was subpoenaed as a third party for internal communications, marketing correspondence, and messaging between Roc Nation staff and streaming platforms during the peak of the 2024 rollout. Roc Nation moved to quash, arguing Drake's requests were overly broad and that Roc Nation was not a party to the underlying dispute. That motion sat in front of the court for months. What Drake appeared to be signaling on Saturday was that he believes the court is about to deny that motion, at least in part, and force production of a narrower slice of those documents. Whether that is what actually happens is unknown, because the ruling has not been publicly issued as of this recording. Even if the ruling breaks Drake's way, the question is not whether the subpoenas get enforced. The question is what those documents can actually do for Drake's career at this point, because a career is not one inside a discovery order. It is one inside the records an artist puts out and the businesses an artist owns, and on both of those fronts, the Roc Nation paperwork does not move the needle. Either way, the news cycle ends, and when it ends, Jay-Z is still on the SoFi stage, Kendrick Lamar is still in a studio with Dave Free putting together whatever pgLang ships in 2027, and Drake is still on kick trying to figure out what his fourth act is going to look like. And here is the deeper thing about the Roc Nation architecture, because it is what makes the whole subpoena strategy on Drake's side look, in hindsight, undercooked. Roc Nation is not a record label in the traditional sense. It is a diversified holdings entity, a management arm for artists, a sports agency arm for NFL and NBA clients, Team Roc, a school in the works with Long Island University, a publishing arm, a boutique label arm, and historically an operating partnership with Live Nation. When Drake subpoenas Roc Nation, he is subpoenaing a legal structure with subsidiaries stacked underneath it, each with its own counsel and privilege log. That is why Jay-Z built the company the way he built it. He built it to be almost impossible to unwind in a courtroom without spending 8 figures in legal fees just to get to the first meaningful deposition. That, more than anything, is the thing Drake should have understood before he laughed at Roc Nation on a Saturday night stream. Now let us talk about Kendrick Lamar's side of the ledger, because I want to walk through what pgLang has actually become in 2026, rather than repeating the word like a slogan. pgLang was announced by Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free in March 2020, and for the first 3 years of its life it was mostly a rumor. Between 2023 and now, though, pgLang has actually shipped. It has shipped short films. It has shipped music videos, including the Baby Keem Run, the SZA collaboration on the Luther video, and the visual identity of the GNX rollout. It has shipped brand work with Calvin Klein. It has shipped a Super Bowl halftime show that was one of the most talked about pieces of live television of the last 5 years. And it has, more quietly, shipped a set of NBA-adjacent creative partnerships that suggest Kendrick Lamar is building a bridge into professional sports media that no rapper of his generation has attempted at this scale. And that is what makes the contrast with Drake feel almost cruel on a night like Saturday. Because on Saturday night, Drake was on a stream, laughing at a legal filing. On Saturday night, Kendrick Lamar was, by every public indicator, in a studio, or in a boardroom, or on a phone call with a partner, or asleep, because it was a Saturday night in August, and he had nothing to prove. And what Kendrick Lamar has understood, that Drake has not yet allowed himself to understand, is that the modern rap career has 2 speeds. There is the speed of the news cycle, which is where Drake lives, and there is the speed of the compounding business, which is where Jay-Z has lived for 20 years and where Kendrick has decided to move. The news cycle pays in views. The compounding business pays in equity. Views expire in 24 hours. Equity outlasts the artist. Kendrick knows which one he is playing for. Jay-Z knows which one he is playing for. Drake, based on Saturday night, is still trying to convince himself he can play for both, and the arithmetic on that has never worked for anybody in the history of this business. And let me anchor this in something Jay-Z has been transparent about for a long time. Jay-Z has said in interviews going back over a decade that he treats music as a marketing arm for the businesses, not the other way around. The albums feed the brand. The brand feeds the companies. The companies feed the equity. The equity gets passed down to Blue Ivy, to Rumi, to Sir, to the trusts, to the foundations. That is the sentence Jay-Z has been writing for 20 years, and the Jay-Z 30 tour is not a chapter of that sentence, it is a punctuation mark. The new sentence is going to be about ownership of the venues themselves, the leagues themselves, the schools themselves. Whether he gets there is another question, but the direction is unambiguous, and every rapper under 45 has that direction on the wall whether they admit it or not. Kendrick Lamar has that direction on the wall. That is what pgLang is. Drake, at least based on Saturday night, either does not have that direction on his wall, or has taken it down and replaced it with a webcam. And I say that with genuine care for what Drake has been to this culture, because there is a version of the next 6 months where Drake reads the room, deletes the Kick account, cancels the next live stream, spends 3 months completely offline, and comes back with a project and a business posture that reintroduces him as a serious executive rather than as a chat window personality. That version of Drake is still available. That version of Drake is still the version that could, 10 years from now, be announcing his own 30-year anniversary tour from his own company, with his own paperwork sitting comfortably in his own vault and no subpoenas from anybody. But that version of Drake does not get announced on Kick on a Saturday night, and it does not get announced with the word GG's, and it does not get announced by laughing at Jay-Z's lawyers. It gets announced the way Jay-Z announces things and the way Kendrick Lamar announces things, which is by disappearing first and letting the work speak when the work is ready to speak. And one more piece of context for the record. The Drake Kick stream on Saturday, August 8, 2026, came less than 2 weeks after Jay-Z's Yankee Stadium second night sellout, and less than a month after the Tottenham Hotspur and SoFi Stadium editions hit the wires. In other words, Drake's Roc Nation subpoena remark did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in a week where Jay-Z's business was in the middle of its loudest month of the year, and Drake, whether consciously or not, chose that week to take a shot at the paperwork side of Jay-Z's business. That is not a coincidence anybody in the industry is treating as random. That is a rapper who felt the pressure of a Jay-Z news cycle and decided to counter-program it with a legal reference. And in professional PR terms, you do not counter-program a Jay-Z Stadium week with a laugh line about Jay-Z's company on a gambling stream. You lose that trade every single time. Now here is what I want the comments to actually argue about tonight, because I think there are 3 real questions in all of this that deserve a real debate. Question 1. Is Drake losing because he cannot beat Kendrick Lamar musically, or is he losing because he refuses to imitate the Jay-Z model of retreat, ownership, and dignity? Question 2. Is Kendrick Lamar, with pgLang, actually building a better version of Roc Nation, or is Kendrick going to hit the same ceiling Jay-Z hit and eventually have to partner with a bigger institution to scale? Question 3. Was the Roc Nation subpoena line on Saturday's Kick stream a genuine signal that Drake's legal team feels good about the ruling, or was it a bluff aimed at rebuilding a fan base that is starting to drift toward Kendrick Lamar and toward the Jay-Z 30 announcement? I have my answers to all 3, but I would rather hear yours, because the answers this comment section gives are going to be more accurate than any article that gets written about this in the morning. Real conversation happens in the pinned comment, not in the headline. And when you zoom all the way out on August 8, 2026, and you look at what actually happened on this one weekend, the story does not read as a Drake story or a Kendrick Lamar story or even a Jay-Z story. The story reads as a generational story. You had one of the biggest rappers of the last 10 years hinting at subpoenas on a gambling live stream. You had one of the biggest rappers of the last 30 years announcing a 4-stadium, 2-continent, 30-year anniversary tour through official channels only. And you had one of the most important rappers of the last 5 years saying absolutely nothing because he did not need to. 3 chapters of hip-hop, side by side, on the same weekend, telling you exactly where the genre is heading. And where the genre is heading is not toward the loudest voice. It is heading toward the quietest architecture. That is the sentence I want you to leave this video with. The loudest voice is not the one shaping the room anymore. The quietest architecture is. Jay-Z knows it. Kendrick Lamar knows it. Everybody at Roc Nation knows it. Everybody at pgLang knows it. And Drake, whether he is willing to sit with it yet or not, is being taught it in real time, one kick stream at a time, one subpoena at a time, one weekend at a time. So here is my final take, and this is where I am going to leave it, because I have spent enough of this video on the interpretation and not enough on the invitation, and I want to invite you into the next conversation with me. If Drake wants to win the next 5 years of his career, he does not need a new diss track, and he does not need a new label move, and he does not need a new streaming platform, and he does not need a new legal strategy. He needs a new register. He needs to speak the way Jay-Z speaks. He needs to move the way Kendrick Lamar moves. He needs to shut down the Kick account for a year and go build something that a chat window cannot clip. That is what Jay-Z did in his late 30s, and it turned into Roc Nation. That is what Kendrick Lamar is doing right now in his late 30s, and it is turning into pgLang. If Drake, at 39, refuses to make that same pivot, then this Saturday stream is not going to be the strangest moment of the year. It is going to be one of many, and each one is going to be a little more expensive than the last. But if Drake does make the pivot, and I want to say this too, because I do not want to close the door on him, because I do not think anybody in this culture should close the door on him, then 5 years from now, we might be sitting here talking about a Drake 30 tour of his own, with stadiums of his own, with a company of his own, with paperwork that nobody is subpoenaing because nobody thinks there is anything left to find. That version of Drake is still available to him. That version of Drake is still on the table. That version of Drake is just not the version that shows up on Kick on a Saturday night talking about GGs. So I want to hear from you now, because I have said my piece and I have said it as honestly as I know how. What was the Drake Roc Nation subpoena line on Saturday's Kick stream in your read of it? Was it a warning shot? Was it a bluff? Was it a slip? Or was it something else that we are all going to understand better in a couple of months when the ruling actually drops? And what do you make of Jay-Z announcing the Jay-Z 30 Stadium dates the exact same weekend? Coincidence, counter-programming, or the universe writing better bars than anybody on the actual mic right now? And where do you have Kendrick Lamar in all of this? Silent architect, waiting champion, or the one who has already moved past the entire conversation? Drop it in the comments. Pin the best one. Argue with each other. That is what this section is for. If you made it this far, thank you sincerely. This channel does not run on algorithms alone. It runs on the people who actually sit with a 14-minute video about paperwork and stadium dates and quiet moves, and that is a rarer audience than the numbers on the sidebar make it look. Subscribe if you have not. Share it with the one friend in your group chat who still thinks this is only about a diss track. And if you want the next piece on where Kendrick Lamar's pgLang expansion is actually heading in 2027, that video is going to be next up, so watch that one right after this. See you in it. Peace.